You settle in to watch a MotoGP race and you expect speed, drama, maybe a little bit of overtaking.
Usual thrills, yeah.
But what we saw in Qatar, that was, well, something else entirely. Twists you couldn't have scripted, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack for you today.
Exactly. For this deep dive, we're putting the Qatar MotoGP race of 2025 right under the microscope. Using the insights you shared with us from Full Recap, Qatar Recap, and Weekend Recap.
Yeah.
Think of us as your shortcut, sort of, to understanding the real story behind the headlines.
Our mission is simple: to cut through the noise and get to the heart of what happened in Qatar.
Yeah, the key moments.
The talking points that everyone's buzzing about, and maybe a few things you might have missed.
Exactly.
We're your guides through this mountain of information you've given us. Okay, so where do we even begin? It has to be Jorge Martin's weekend, right?
Oh, definitely. He arrived as the reigning champion, but already carrying the weight of that left-hand injury from Thailand. That scaphoid thing.
Right. And as Weekend Recap pointed out, Martin's approach to the Qatar GP felt almost like an extension of preseason testing.
Yeah, it really tells you how much that previous injury was still playing a role. There was a real question mark over whether he'd even make it to the Sunday race. A big one.
Then came that crash, a really high-intensity fall on a right-hand corner, the kind that makes you wince just watching the replay.
Yeah. Weekend Recap described him bouncing on the track and then into the gravel. Horrible.
And the initial medical update from Dr. Chartel, as reported, was definitely concerning.
Traumatic pneumothorax.
Yeah, that's air trapped in the space around the lungs. And a suspicion of rib injuries, potential fractures.
Straight to hospital for more checks.
Now, here's a point where Full Recap really makes you think.
Yes, Full Recap raises some pretty serious questions about whether the system did enough to protect Martin after the crash.
How so?
Well, they highlight that the marshals on the scene didn't seem aware of the possibility of rib fractures, which, could have affected how he was moved.
Right, that's critical.
And this leads Full Recap to really scrutinize the decision to allow him to race at all, considering he was already managing significant pain. So, for you listening, this brings up a crucial point. How do we balance a rider's sheer determination to compete with the objective assessment of their physical condition?
It's a tough balance. And Full Recap doesn't pull any punches about Aprilia's decision and the medical clearance.
No, they didn't.
Suggesting there were significant errors in judgment. They even mention the very real risk of a punctured lung if that pneumothorax had been more severe.
Which is terrifying to think about.
It makes you wonder about the pressures involved, doesn't it? The team, the rider.
It does. And what Full Recap brings to the forefront here is this ongoing discussion in MotoGP about what fit to race truly means. It's not always black and white. They bring up past examples, like Lorenzo racing soon after surgery, which, looking back,
were incredibly risky.
Yeah. It highlights that this isn't always a clear-cut decision. Far from it.
Full Recap also gives us a glimpse into the different viewpoints within the medical community itself.
Right. They mentioned Dr. Marquez, the traumatologist, who apparently didn't see Martin racing in Qatar as locura madness.
Okay.
But then you have the intensivists, who take a broader view of overall recovery and might advocate for longer periods on the sidelines. Mandatory recovery.
So different perspectives even among the experts.
Exactly. Which underscores the complexity of these situations.
And Full Recap directly tackles that potential conflict between team pressure and the rider's own well-being.
They do acknowledge the vital role of Angel Chartel, though. He closely monitors the riders, looking for any signs that might contradict their claims of fitness.
That layer of oversight is clearly important, essential, really.
Yeah.
Interestingly, Full Recap also points out that Martin's crash itself might not have been solely down to his injury.
Oh.
They suggest he went wide on the curb and then applied the throttle on a bike he's still getting to grips with.
Ah, the Aprilia transition.
Exactly, after switching from Ducati. It's a good reminder that adapting to a new machine is a huge challenge in itself, even for the best riders.
Absolutely. And incredibly, despite all this, Full Recap notes, he still managed third in the warm-up.
It shows the talent.
It's a testament to his skill and determination. But the final update from Full Recap paints a much, much more serious picture.
Yeah, what was the final word?
He's under observation. The pneumothorax is being treated, drained. And he suffered a shocking 11 rib fractures.
11.
Wow.
Yeah.
The prognosis, according to Full Recap, is that his season is likely on hold until after the summer break.
Oh, man. That's huge for the championship.
Huge. For you, this really emphasizes the inherent risks these athletes take every single time they get on those bikes.
And the potential for long-term consequences from even just one incident. A truly sobering situation for Martin. Okay, let's turn our attention now to the man who reclaimed the championship lead in Qatar, Marc Marquez.
The winner.
It wasn't just a win, it felt like a strategic clinic, didn't it?
Absolutely. Weekend Recap really highlighted the mental game Marquez played, particularly in managing his tires for those crucial final laps.
How so?
They described his early race pace as deliberately controlled, almost like backing up the field to conserve his rubber. Smart.
Right. So for you listening, this shows that winning at this level isn't just about outright speed.
No, it's about being smart, calculating, racecraft.
Qatar Recap filled in the details of that chaotic start, noting the contact with his brother Alex in turn 1.
Yeah, lost a winglet there.
Right, Marc lost a rear winglet. Interestingly, Marc himself, as Qatar Recap quoted, took the blame.
Did he?
Yeah, putting it down to rear tire slip. He said the contact with Alex was more my mistake than his.
Oh, okay. Morbidelli certainly capitalized on that early drama, though, grabbing the lead.
He did. And Bagnaia had a lightning start from P11, moving up to 6th by the second lap. Impressive.
The early laps were a real flurry of activity, just frantic. Qatar Recap details how Bagnaia continued his charge.
Passed Vinales for 3rd on lap 4.
And even briefly got ahead of Marquez for 2nd on lap 5. Briefly.
But Marquez responded quickly, didn't he? Retaking 2nd just 2 laps later?
He did. And on that same lap, Vinales also managed to slip past Bagnaia into 3rd. It was a real back-and-forth shuffle.
Then, around the halfway point, things really got interesting. Weekend Recap described Vinales making a move on Marquez for the lead on lap 10.
Looked like Vinales might have had the pace at that point.
For a moment, maybe. But Marquez, showing that relentless competitive fire, snatched it back just a lap later.
And both of them also passed Morbidelli in that exchange.
Right. From that point on, Marquez and Vinales started to create some breathing room from the rest.
And Marquez wasn't just content to, hold the lead. Weekend Recap highlights how he set the fastest lap of the race on lap 16.
And then went on to break the overall track record, just piling it on.
Incredible pace late in the race. Qatar Recap provided some really insightful quotes from Marquez about his race, too.
Yeah, we had the one about the contact with Alex. What else?
Reflecting on Vinales' pace, he noted, I came to the first corner and saw KTM. I thought it was Acosta, but it was Vinales. He was riding very well. I was trying to understand what he was doing better than me.
That constant analysis, even mid-race, that's what makes him tick.
And another key quote from Marquez, reported by Weekend Recap, really gives you a sense of his mindset. When it's difficult, I'm more focused. He said, in Qatar, I had to cover the Austin error because I also knew that Pecco Bagnaia and my brother were going to try to attack me.
So redemption for Austin and keeping his rivals in check.
Exactly. This victory clearly had extra significance for him in the context of the championship battle.
And the championship standings certainly reflect that now. Marquez has an 18-point lead over his brother Alex.
And a 30-point cushion over Bagnaia. Decent gap already.
This race was also a historic moment for Marquez personally, his 91st victory.
Moving him ahead of the legendary Angel Nieto on the all-time list.
A truly incredible achievement, just remarkable consistency over the years.
It really is.
Now let's talk about another major talking point from Qatar, Maverick Vinales' penalty.
Ah, yes. Rode such a strong race, leading for a good portion. Looked set for a podium.
He did, but Weekend Recap mentioned the post-race investigation into Vinales' tire pressure.
And Qatar Recap subsequently reported the decision, a 16-second penalty. Ouch.
Why the penalty again?
For having tire pressure below the allowed limit for more than 60% of the race.
Wow, over 60%. That's significant.
It is. And for you listening, this highlights the incredibly tight regulations in MotoGP and how even a, seemingly small infraction can have a really big impact on the result.
That penalty unfortunately dropped Vinales right out of the podium positions, gutting for him and Aprilia.
Must have been. Qatar Recap included a quote from Vinales about his mindset during the race, though.
What did he say?
I was only looking ahead. I didn't think about anything else. I didn't have time. I was focused on moving forward. I don't care what happens later. I'm happy with the result and the performance.
So completely focused on his riding, perhaps aware of the potential risks of running lower pressure, maybe?
Could be. Or just fully committed to getting the best possible track position. It raises a really interesting question about that balance.
Between pushing the limits for performance and adhering strictly to the regulations, where's the line?
Exactly. Now, let's consider Francesco Bagnaia's race, starting from 11th on the grid.
Not ideal.
He ultimately finished in 3rd place after Vinales' penalty. Got bumped up.
But it wasn't the dominant kind of Sunday performance we've sometimes seen from him before, was it?
No, not really. Qatar Recap featured a quote from Bagnaia reflecting on his weekend, particularly the Saturday versus Sunday difference.
Right. What was his take?
He said, if I could do it on Sunday, I should also be able to do it on Saturday. Yesterday was more or less like always. In the sprint, I can't be as aggressive. I don't have the same performance as on Sundays. I have to improve that.
He's clearly aware of his struggles in the shorter sprint races, still trying to crack that code.
Seems so. Yeah. He also elaborated on the main race itself, mentioning that pushing hard to close the gap early on might have led to his rear tire overheating.
Ah, cooking the tire too early.
Yeah. He also noted losing time in that early scrap with Morbidelli. For you listening, this just shows the incredibly fine margins involved.
Absolutely. One small thing can compromise your whole race strategy.
Need that perfect execution from start to finish.
Definitely. Okay, now let's touch on some of the other notable riders and incidents from the Qatar GP. It was an eventful one down the field, too.
It really was. Franco Morbidelli had a fantastic start, didn't he? Even led the race briefly.
Yeah, Weekend Recap highlighted that strong start. He eventually finished 4th after Vinales' penalty. Good result for him.
And Qatar Recap also included a quote emphasizing the value of Valentino Rossi's presence within the team for achieving that strong performance.
The Rossi effect, still strong, shows the impact of experience and mentorship behind the scenes.
Definitely. Johann Zarco also deserves a shout-out for his impressive 5th place finish on the Honda.
Yeah, Qatar Recap noted that. Good ride on the Honda.
He was quoted as saying he felt very close to something big, which has to be encouraging for Honda after their recent challenges.
For sure. For you listening, this could be a sign that Honda is starting to turn a corner in their development. Early days, but positive.
Let's hope so. There were a few on-track clashes as well, weren't there?
Qatar Recap detailed Fabio Di Giannantonio's incident with Alex Marquez.
Ah, yeah, what was said there?
Di Giannantonio stated that Marquez's mistake was a little on the limit, sincerely, at this level. A bit sharp.
Yeah, shows the intense pressure and close quarters racing. Tempers can fray.
And Alex Marquez himself accepted the penalty for that incident, as quoted in Qatar Recap.
To his credit?
Yeah, apologizing to Di Giannantonio and his team. Despite the penalty, he managed to recover to 7th, salvaging some valuable championship points.
That resilience can be crucial over a long season, picking up points even on bad days.
Absolutely. What about the rookie, Pedro Acosta?
Managed to recover to 8th place after what sounds like a difficult start to his Sunday race.
Okay, decent points.
Qatar Recap quoted him describing it as an acceptable race when the bike worked without issues.
Ah, hinting at some ongoing setup challenges with the KTM, perhaps.
Seems likely. It's all part of the steep learning curve for a rookie in MotoGP. Adjusting to the bike, the tires, the format.
Definitely. In contrast, Brad Binder had a really tough weekend, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. Qatar Recap reported him calling it the most difficult MotoGP weekend of his career, struggling significantly with grip and handling.
Wow, that's a strong statement from Binder.
It just goes to show how sensitive these bikes are to track conditions and setup. What works one weekend might not work the next.
True. Weekend Recap also noted Jack Miller's crash and subsequent rejoin.
Augusto Fernandez's crash.
And Joan Mir's retirement due to contact with Di Giannantonio. It was a truly eventful race throughout the field. Lots going on.
Indeed. And as we touched on earlier, the championship standings now see Marc Marquez leading with 123 points.
Followed by Alex Marquez with 105 and Bagnaia with 93.
The season is definitely shaping up to be a thrilling battle for the title. Early days, but intriguing.
Very intriguing. Now, Full Recap went beyond just the race results and delved into some of the deeper issues, didn't they?
They did, starting with the discussion on rider mentality and team dynamics, especially in light of Martin's injury.
What was the angle there?
They brought up Lorenzo's past decision to race with anesthesia, calling it a truly reckless act, basically.
Wait, that was crazy.
Which ultimately led to stricter regulations around riders competing after surgery. So for you listening, this shows how past events, even controversial ones, can shape the rules and safety protocols of the sport today.
Learning from past mistakes, hopefully.
What's fascinating here is the ongoing tension that Full Recap highlights about the immense pressure riders face to compete, even when injured.
Yeah, the drive is just immense.
They gave the example of Randy DePugna racing after a serious tibia fracture, using hyperbaric chamber treatment to try and speed up his recovery.
It really underscores the incredible dedication and the risks these athletes are willing to take. Almost superhuman sometimes.
It does. But Full Recap reiterated Angel Chartel's vital role in closely monitoring the rider's physical condition.
The medical director.
Yeah, looking for those subtle indicators that a rider might not be as fit as they claim, even if they've passed the initial medical checks. A crucial safety net.
They even shared an anecdote about the intense rivalry between Rossi and Marquez in the past.
Oh, still talking about that.
Apparently, noting Rossi's perceived negativity after certain on-track incidents. It seems those historical rivalries can still cast a long shadow, even now.
Old habits die hard, maybe.
Yeah.
Shifting gears slightly, Full Recap also dedicated some time to bike technology and aerodynamics.
Always a hot topic.
They discussed the impact of winglets, comparing Zarco's Honda to the dominant Ducati Aero package, and even mentioned Alex Marquez's ability to perform well despite having damaged aero after that Turn 1 incident.
Right, so how important are they really?
Well, for you, this illustrates the constant evolution of these machines and the delicate balance between different performance factors. It's not just aero.
They made an interesting comparison to Iannon's podium finish back in 2015 with a damaged fairing,
I remember that.
suggesting that while aerodynamics are definitely important, they aren't the only factor determining success.
Full Recap emphasized that tires remain the most crucial element influencing overall performance. Still king.
Always the tires. But what Full Recap really dug into on the technical side was that black cylinder.
Ah, the mass damper.
Yeah, the mass damper that was observed on Marquez's Ducati swing arm.
They pointed out that this device, also used by other Ducati riders, notably not Bagnaia, interestingly, is designed to reduce vibrations and chatter, ultimately giving the rider more stability and control.
So smoothing out the ride.
Basically, yeah. For you, this is a small but potentially significant detail that highlights the level of engineering that goes into these bikes. Tiny gains matter.
Full Recap even speculated that Ducati might be strategically showcasing this mass damper while potentially keeping other, more significant developments under wraps.
The classic misdirection. Possible.
It's all part of the constant innovation and secrecy that surrounds MotoGP technology, that tech war.
Definitely. They also briefly mentioned Yamaha reportedly testing a V4 engine in Valencia.
Ooh, big change for Yamaha, if true.
Yeah, hinting at potential future shifts and engine configurations across the grid. Could shake things up.
Interesting times. Finally, Full Recap dedicated a segment to rider opinions and potential future moves within the paddock. The silly season never really stops, does it?
Never. There was a discussion about whether Bagnaia is still Marquez's main rival.
And the verdict?
The prevailing thought seemed to be that Marquez, in his current form, is his own biggest competitor. He sets the bar.
Hard to argue with that right now. They highlighted Bagnaia's own comments about struggling to overtake on Saturdays.
Yeah, we mentioned that earlier.
Which, for a reigning champion, is a significant area for improvement. Full Recap also revisited some of Bagnaia's past comments about the perceived advantages of factory-backed bikes.
Bringing up old quotes, eh?
Seems so. They even looked at Bagnaia's MotoGP win count in comparison to some of the sports legends, noting he still has, some ground to make up to be in that conversation.
Fair enough. Full Recap also brought up the intriguing idea of Dorna's Carmelo Ezpeleta potentially intervening.
How so?
To try and balance the competition if one rider becomes too dominant, drawing parallels to the Rossi era.
Manipulating the show. Controversial idea.
Very. They also speculated about Marquez's future with Ducati beyond his current contract and the potential interest he might attract from other manufacturers.
KTM Honda return. Always whispers. The rider market is always buzzing.
Alex Marquez's move to Gresini and his positive feedback about the Ducati bike were also discussed.
Right, really underscoring the impact of having competitive machinery. Bike matters.
Hugely. Full Recap touched on the VR46 team dynamic with the Marquez brothers, recalling past tensions. And the recent incident with Di Giannantonio and the subsequent refusal of an apology from Alex's side, apparently.
Ooh, bit of spice there. Personal relationships and team dynamics can definitely have a real impact on track.
For sure. Full Recap introduced a really interesting way of categorizing riders, too, labeling some as Moto2 Premium.
Moto2 Premium, what's that mean?
This refers to riders who showed great consistency on equal machinery in Moto2, but might rely more heavily on having the absolute best bike in MotoGP.
Struggle when the equipment isn't top tier?
Exactly. They contrasted this with riders like Marquez, who seem able to extract performance regardless of the bike, make the difference themselves.
That's a fascinating lens through which to analyze rider talent, isn't it? Bike versus rider contribution.
Yeah, it really makes you think. There was also speculation about Pedro Acosta's future, with KTM potential interest from other teams.
Already, he's just arrived.
Well, and a perception that he hasn't seemed as happy or smiley recently. Who knows?
Full recap. Also briefly touched on Raul Fernandez's ongoing difficulties and some of the possible reasons behind them.
Still not clicking for him consistently.
The pressure on young riders in MotoGP is just immense. Tough gig.
Brutal. Finally, full recap addressed a listener question about the possibility of world superbike riders like Toprak, Razgatlu, Yulu making a successful transition to MotoGP.
Always comes up. What was the take?
The general consensus was that it remains a very, very challenging jump due to the significant differences in the bikes, the tires, just a different world.
Yeah, very few manage it successfully.
They also mentioned a potential shift in Dorna's perspective regarding the dominance of Spanish riders in MotoGP.
Oh, interesting.
Possibly influencing opportunities for riders from other countries, like Aron to move up, maybe wanting more international flavor.
Strategic and business considerations within the sport. Always part of the picture.
Always.
Okay, so to recap this deep dive into the Qatar MotoGP, wow, a lot happened.
Understatement.
We saw Martin's unfortunate and potentially season-altering injury, which raises serious questions about rider safety and fitness to race.
Definitely the big, sobering story.
Then Marquez delivered a masterful and strategic victory, really solidifying his championship ambitions right from the off.
Clinical performance.
Vinales' incredibly strong ride was ultimately overshadowed by that controversial tire pressure penalty. What could have been.
Yep, podium gone.
And Bagnaia, while securing a podium, still seems to be searching for that consistent Saturday performance. Still work to do.
Agreed. It was, without a doubt, a thrilling and incident-packed start to the 2025 season. Sets quite a tone.
It really does. And as you reflect on all of this, it really prompts some important questions, doesn't it?
Like, what are the potential long-term consequences of Jorge Martin's significant injuries for the championship race? Is he out of it?
And can anyone consistently challenge the sheer dominance and strategic brilliance of Marc Marquez throughout this season? Or is he just on another level right now?
Big question. And how will the ongoing scrutiny and enforcement of tire pressure regulations continue to impact race strategies and ultimately the outcomes of these Grand Prix? More penalties coming.
Good point. On that note, consider this. In the relentless pursuit of technological advancement in MotoGP,
The wings, the ride height devices, the data.
with the ever-increasing amounts of data and the tightening grip of regulations, are we perhaps at risk of losing sight of the fundamental human element?
Meaning?
The incredible skill, the inherent danger, and the raw bravery that defines these extraordinary athletes every time they take to the track. Are we regulating the human out of it?
That's a deep thought to end on. Balancing tech and the rider.
Something to chew on. Thank you for diving deep into the Qatar MotoGP with us today.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. We encourage you to share your own insights and any follow-up questions you might have.